School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is 6:01. Since Priscilla doesn't have a mic, I'm going to do roll call, but all board members are present at this time. On March 16th, Governor Greg Abbott acted to maintain government transparency and continued government operations while reducing face-to-face contact for government open meetings. As Texas works to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, the governor granted the Office of the Attorney General's request for suspension of certain open meeting statutes. This temporary suspension will allow for telephone or video conference meetings of governmental bodies that are accessible to the public in an effort to reduce in-person meetings that assemble large groups of people. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. This meeting is being live streamed to the public. Some administrative staff may be participating by live stream video. And we have now all gone back up to the diocese, and we are allowing people to view, come into our board meetings as well. We will just be socially distanced. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. As you can see, we are slowly moving back up to where we are still socially distancing, and some of you may not be able to see Dr. Ely is usually to my left, but he is over here a little bit farther on my left, and all the board members are kind of spread out up here. So tonight is a called workshop meeting that will be discussing the budget. We will take public comments. But at this time, there are no online public comments and no in-person public comments. Therefore, we're going to move on to our action items. And our first one is a request for board approval of our learning management system, which is, you'll hear us abbreviate that a lot, called a LMS, Learning Management System, presented by Dr. Edwards and Dr. Burkholder.
Thank you, Mr. Asbeck. Dr. Ely, members of the board, as you know, on July the 8th, we brought to you a discussion item for consideration of a learning management system, as you shared an LMS. Just as a reminder, the learning management system serves as a platform for teachers and students to use to facilitate instruction. It can contain curriculum documents, lessons, additional resources, basically a one-stop shop for teachers, students, and a lot of information for parents. The district with an LMS will house all of the resources in one place, and we sent this out for a request for information several months ago, and so we're here tonight to again ask for the board's approval on that. Included in the document are the rank of the three companies. We narrowed from 5 to 3 based upon the initial criteria, and then from those 3 companies had an opportunity to really review those products, use those in what's called a sandbox. We got to experiment and play with those a little bit. And with that being said, we are in near final negotiations with Power School or Schoology as our recommendation for an LMS. Again, we expect that agreement to be settled by the end of the week, and so we wanted to share that with the board. We also included there the rank of the other 2 products of the final 3 for that information. So we're here tonight to ask for approval of the LMS. I know Dr. Burkholder is on Zoom. Ms. Kovacs, as we know from last time, was also a member of the committee. About 40 teachers, administrators, both at the district and campus level, reviewed these LMSs to kind of come up with the best product for our school district. So, any questions?
I just have kind of a quick technical kind of question. I know with some of them, you can, like I know the kids go to a portal sometimes for their books. Are we able to place those books inside all of one area? That's something I think I would kind of like to see.
Yes, most of our resources can reside within that structure of the platform.
And then teachers could upload videos to that. And I mean, I really love the idea of going to LMS. I think they're great. I think it's going to provide teachers with a lot of resources and kids like keeping everything in one area rather than having to remember 20 different websites to go to. I think this is really a great idea.
This is a long-term situation for us. This is not just related to COVID or anything like that. They may have pushed us a little bit quicker, but we feel like this is going to be very valuable for years to come for our students, teachers, parents, and just all of those that we serve.
Shall we do a motion if we have more discussion?
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the learning management system as presented.
I have a motion and a second. Any more questions or discussion? Timetable. I know that's probably important to a lot of staff members as well as parents. So now that we've moved this as fast, glad we were able to have this during our board meeting tonight so it can get the ball rolling. Timetable, do we know?
So some of the advantages of going ahead and doing this, as you can imagine, most of the districts that don't already have a learning management system across the state, as well as with the state itself, are looking at these type of platforms. So we're hoping to get out in front of that. So we'll start that, again, as soon as we finish the negotiations or the agreement with that, start developing those processes. It's basically a trainer of trainer models that we'll utilize for campuses. So we'll begin to roll that out just as soon as possible. Coinciding with the start of school, and this is really going to be a process for us. So we'll move as quickly and as effectively as we can to get this out for students to use, for teachers, students, and parents to use. So as far as a specific timetable, we'll have to come back and really kind of share what that might look like.
Sounds good.
Would this MLS system, would it allow, or LMS system, sorry, would it allow for students or parents or both to access their grade or a transcript of some sort at some point in time during that period?
So you want to jump in there?
So the learning management systems that we reviewed do have a grading feature in there where anything that was completed and graded in the LMS is available. If our student information system can speak to this LMS, which they're working on, of course, as we speak, then we may be able to also have all grades available in the LMS for teachers and students and families to be able to see. If not, for now, they would still be able to see what was graded in the LMS, and then go to Texas Gradebook for all the other grades.
That is an expectation for us in the future for those programs to talk with one another and, again, be very accessible and convenient for parents.
Okay, good, thank you.
I have a quick question is regarding, like if a kid has like an Apple Mac or Word or whatever, is it compatible with pulling up and opening both of those for the teacher?
Yeah, it's device agnostic, so it can work with any device, iPad, laptop, phone, any device.
So to Amy's question, the first group of trainers, how many people will that be, and how long is that course? Is that like a 2-week course or a 3-week course?
I don't know the specifics of the training. That is to be determined once we continue to work with the company and develop that. So right now, I believe they called for 4 to 5 different representatives from the campus to be able to start that process and build on that capacity, I believe, is what we referenced or what we were asked for by the company the other day.
So the timeline as to how long it'll take to train will be determined largely by which features we implement from the very beginning. We know it's probably not wise to implement every feature of the LMS in this quick timetable that we have. So determining what's the mission critical for us, and then determining a planning calendar from that point forward. We're also going to be able to leverage some resources from another school district that's done a recent implementation of this LMS and has a lot of resources available for us that they're going to let us use. So we'll have some things that'll be residing, videos that'll be residing online, and other training materials as well. So we're excited about leveraging the experience of others in the field and helping us through this.
Any other questions?
Madam President, I got a procedural question to ask. The motion we have in front of us is to approve a learning management system. And that's just to say we're going to go to a learning management system. We've got amount not to exceed $300,000. We still don't know who the company is going to be with the final contract. Are we authorizing the superintendent to execute that contract for an amount not to exceed $300,000? Because that's not part of this motion. At this point, all we're doing is approving a learning management system. We're not approving who that's coming from or a price not to exceed $300,000. So this really doesn't authorize the district to sign a contract, not really, to spend that money. We're not authorizing the superintendent to do it. We're not authorizing the president to sign a contract or who we're going to sign the contract with. So I'm not sure, except for authorized we're going to be using a learning management system, we haven't approved anything, not with this language.
Matt, did you hear that, the comment by Mr. Finley?
Yes, sir, and I understand where he's coming from. The verbiage and the budget information could also be used up in the recommendation where we authorize the district to a not to exceed amount to the offers as ranked beginning with number 1 and authorize the administration to finalize the negotiation, execute the agreement with the successful offerer. Something to that effect meets the intent, I think, that Mr. Finley is getting to make it clear these are the boundaries that the board is allowing the district to operate under.
And that is one reason that we included the 3 in the rank order of that, through that negotiation.
Right, but we don't have a final negotiation, we don't have a final executed final price, we don't have a final firm. So, and there's nothing in here to indicate that we are authorizing anybody in the administration to spend the money. We're just saying that we can go up to $300,000, so we haven't even authorized the superintendent to execute a contract in that regard, or who we're going to execute that contract with. So all we're doing is saying, yeah, go ahead with the LMS, but who gets it, how we're going to spend the money, and who's going to be authorized to make that signature. So I just want the motion to be clear, saying how much money we're going to spend up to the $300,000, and then who we're going to authorize to, who's going to be authorized to execute that contract and to whom.
So clarity in the motion.
Well, I mean, it's a good point, but it says as presented, which as presented says the administrative considerations, fiscal impact. That's part of the as presented. So, I guess it's, splitting hairs, but there is a dollar cost being more than $300,000 for the first year and additional considerations for data migration and training. So, and it does stipulate where the funds would be coming from. So I guess you could add something to the motion if you want to, but and they are listed in order. And this is not the first time we've done something like this where we've given a dollar amount and voted on them to move forward with it. Even though negotiations are still going on as far as just the fine tuning of the thing. I mean, they pretty much have an idea what it is they're getting and what they're expecting and the dollar amount. So, anyway.
So just a reminder, per local policy, you do authorize the superintendent to make purchases above $50,000 if they have been through our competitive bidding process,
Yes.
like DIR. And so this is a DIR purchase. So technically, we could have just purchased it and done a report at the next meeting. We thought it was important for us to have this conversation. We had the conversation back on the 8th of this month, let you know where we were in the process so that you could formally, since it is quite a bit of money, it's going to fundamentally change how we teach, that we wanted to bring that here. So I think we have the authorization per board policy to go forward through that route should we need to. If Ms. Shriver would like to amend her motion, we can go that route as well. We're happy to do whatever pleases the board. We're just excited about being able to move forward in this purchase.
I think we should leave it as is, as presented. We've heard
I
all the
agree.
sides, we know the ranking of them, we've got a price in here that we've looked at. I think we should move forward with what I read earlier.
Yeah. And just as a reminder, that's coming from the instructional materials allotments that we gain from the IMA funds that we gain from the state usually that can be used for technology and textbooks. So, all right, so Mr. Finley, you're fine with leaving that as, okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion passes 7-0. All right, next item is going into our board budget workshop, which is our discussion of the 2020-2021 general fund revenue and expenditure projections, presented by Dr. Ely and Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam President. Can you hear me all right? You good? Okay. We're going to go ahead and get launched into our presentation. So tonight's agenda is going to be a little shorter than it has been in the past because we have kind of laid out the many things that we need to discuss. I guess you guys don't have anything to look at, do you? Unless you've got a computer there in front of you.
It's on our team.
It is? Okay. Remember? Yeah, we can go ahead and pass those around. So this will be just one portion of it, but it's the money part that we'll be looking at here in just a little bit.
Mr. Westbrook is visually impeded over here. He has.
Oh, you can watch the big screen there too, if you want. Cut them again, I guess. How about that?
It's dark now. You won't be able to see it anyway. Good luck.
Steve, are we okay with that? Okay, thank you. All right, so we've kind of talked about the major talking points, major considerations for the budget for this year. So where we are here in July is kind of an update on revenue projections for next year and expenditure projection or appropriation projections for next year. And really, it's about looking at where we are right now under current year. So we'll do that first. We'll talk about next year. Do a brief debt service update because there's not much to say there. Then we'll talk about the timeline moving forward. So we are talking about this year, current year, 2019-2020, and we're calling these June projections. We have June actuals, so what we have spent in our budget through the end of the quarter ending June 30th, or the month ending June 30th, excuse me, it's not a quarter, but we're projecting the next 2 months, so July and August, those expenditures. So that's what we're going to be looking at here. So this is the detail on the revenue part, this top part of the template that you're getting used to looking at. So first column you see right there is where we were in April. That's what we shared with you in May and in June. That information, it's kind of where we got caught up and made projections through the end of the year in April. We were just moving into COVID. We didn't know how long we were going to be operating in a remote fashion. We didn't know how that would impact our expenditures or our revenue. And so the next column, that second one you see, is our June forecast now. As I said, actuals through the end of June and forecasting the next 2 months. So you can see some changes. I'm not going to get into the details there because if you go to the bottom line, the total estimated revenues changed about a little less than $400,000. So on a $133 million revenue budget, didn't change much for this year. So some money moved around some different places, but basically what we're looking at is revenue by the end of the year of just under $134 million or 133.8. Okay? So we do have a little bit of change in our appropriations detail, again, under current year. So again, the first column is the April forecast, and the second one is where we are now at the end of June. And I've circled the $500,000 that we talked about last 2 months in regard to COVID operational and instructional unknowns. We just stuck a number in there. And you see here in June is not in there because it has been placed in other parts of the budget. Some of it's gone into payroll, some of it's gone into contracted services. We were with we participated with a COVID cooperative with Region 20. Some of it is in 6,200, and some of it is in materials and supplies. So that's how that's been captured in our actuals there. And you see that our total appropriations have moved from 131 million in April down to 127.2. And why is that? Well, because our actuals are showing we've spent considerably less, about 1.4 million less in contracted services than we thought we were going to be spending when we looked at our numbers in April. We've spent about 1.1 million less in materials and supplies from where we thought we were going to be in April, and about $800,000 less and other operating costs. If you look at the top of 6,100, our payroll costs, that's where the largest percentage of our money is, of our budget is, about 83% of our budget's in 6,100. That one actually didn't move very much. It went down and then it went back up as we started other personnel costs this summer. We've brought a number of teachers in to start the lesson development for next school year as we move partially into remote environment. So we've had some other some payroll costs that have kind of caused that to stay about the same. But we have realized some savings in other places that we didn't know we would. We didn't know we would be remote or mostly remote for 5 months. And we see that it impacted travel in 6,400, that it impacted some contracted services that we just didn't avail ourselves of. And some of those contracted services actually were for some testing, and some of that moved up into 6,100 as well, as we did more of our testing of our special needs students this summer on our own instead of contracting with another agency to come. We've actually saved quite a bit of money doing that as well. And so that's where we are right now. So we're looking much better under current year in appropriations as to where we're planning on ending this year. Okay. Questions so far under current year? So you see it's a little bit difference of just under $4 million. So again, this is the sheet one that we gave to you right there that we passed. The side that has a 1 on it is this one. So you can really this puts the top part of that we looked at for revenue, the bottom part that we looked at for appropriations, and the very bottom, which looks at our fund balance, our beginning fund balance, our ending fund balance, and our projected surplus or deficit. So under current year, when we were speaking the last couple months, we were a little over $2 million of a projected surplus for current year for fiscal 20 for the 19-20 school year. And we're looking at right now about 6.6 million of a surplus. I will tell you that that's we've talked about some additional purchases over the last 48, 72 hours, I'd say. That's going to impact this, so it won't be 6.6, and I'll just talk briefly about that. You may have heard the Texas Education Agency late last week made a big announcement about setting aside $200 million, I get that figure right, of state funds, of really CARES Act funds, to be able to leverage and purchase technology for students across the state of Texas. They do a matching program, so for school districts to access those funds, they have to do a dollar-for-dollar match. So it's really $400 million that will be available, $200 million from local districts and $200 million from the CARES Act money that the state has to be able to purchase devices. We had to go through a connectivity survey that we completed late last week, and we had to make a decision as to how many devices or what money we would set aside for that. So we've set aside, we put a big ask in there, not knowing what we were going to be able to get, and also not knowing and if we decide to go another direction, we don't have to purchase all the ones that we put in on our survey. We set aside $1.2 million for the purchase of additional, that's of district funds that would leverage $2.4 million of additional funds for the purchase of hotspots, which are a marginal cost, but for additional devices. That will certainly help us in any type of remote environment that we have, and will help us with our LMS. It will help us with our campuses, many of which have some aging devices. And even when we get back into fully face-to-face instruction, whenever that is in our future, we will still have those needs on our campuses. So I was on the conference call with the commissioner. We have those, 2 a week, except last week when we had 3. At 3 o'clock today, he did speak about that, and he is, they are working very hard with the vendors to try to get those as soon as possible. So we don't have any, we don't know how many we're going to be able to purchase or what the actual matching amount will be. What does that mean? They have set aside a pot of money. If the requests statewide are greater than that pot of money that's available, they're going to have to decide how they cut those down. They give us for example, they could give us 2/3, authorize us for 2/3 of what we asked for. Or they could prioritize them in districts that have a higher proportion of poverty than districts that don't. Or they could choose to prioritize districts that are more rural and those that don't have the connectivity that suburban and urban districts have. We don't know how that's going to go. So we will be given a number and an amount. So we'll know, and then we can choose. We can buy all those devices, half those devices, a fraction of them. And that's going to, we'll have to make that determination when we find that out. We would not spend, I would find it hard to believe we would spend that whole amount that we have set aside. So we know we need a smaller amount. We put it in the survey of a bigger amount. We would like to go to that if we can avail ourselves of the state matching funds. So there is one thing that we need to be cognizant of, though, because it is summer. And you always have to ask yourself when you purchase something in the summer is when is it going to arrive? Because if it arrives by August 31st, it's on this fiscal year. And we're thinking of it right now in this fiscal year. If it has to move to next fiscal year, if it comes after September 1st, that could impact the number we buy or the budget for next year. And so we're watching all of that. This is, again, a lot of things are fast moving. This is a very fast moving process as the state is really working hard to increase connectivity for kids and families across the state.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Is that on? I don't think that's on.
Is it on?
Okay.
Lost my military bearing. All right. So on the, what is the why? How should I say, during this last remote instruction learning period over the last semester, were there any weak areas as far as remote learning, hotspots? So you submitted a number for technology-wise, but is that to solve a problem or just to sort of get ahead of the curve? What is the why? You know what I'm saying? What is the purpose? I mean, I know Abbott said he wanted 100% connectivity, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years from now, but do we have 100% connectivity for every student in the district or no?
No, we do not. That's one of the reasons why we're purchasing hotspots and giving more of those who will need those and be able to help support that through the first, Dr. Edwards, first year, 1 year, 2 years?
1 to 2 years, yes. Some are contracted for a year. The others are 2. We did have many students who were using paper packets and things like that during remote instruction, and this opportunity for them to have the device and that connectivity is very important for our students.
Is there any guess about how far away we are?
Dr. Burkholder, you have probably have the best idea of the survey that we've done of students lately. Did you hear the question first? And if so, can you answer that?
I think I heard he was asking if we know how many students need access. Is that correct?
How far away are we from 100% connectivity for our students? How would you answer that question?
So I can tell you in looking at the survey data that we've received so far, that we have a large number of families requesting hotspots. However, there are far fewer that have no internet access at all. So as far as a percentage, I can't give you a percentage, but I would say there's probably 2 to 250 families that don't have internet access at all. Others have very slow access, some only have a smartphone.
All right, thank you. It's just
Does that help?
sorry to interrupt.
No, she just asked,
Go
did that
ahead.
help?
Yes, no, it did help, Dr. Burkholder. It was just that after that last conversation, if a parent asks, so why are you purchasing all the technology? What is it being used for? I can sort of say, our goal is to sort of get to 100% connectivity to help out the lower socioeconomic strata in our district and sort of move forward. I think it'll help. That's sort of a general answer, right? Or,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, ma'am. We got talking about the $1.2 million there. So that's, thank you, going back to the budget presentation here. So that 6.6 million is probably a high watermark. We know there's going to be a little less, but we also know that where we end in August and then where we are at audit in December, sometimes it's a little different as well. So that's good. It's a good kind of order of magnitude number that we're looking at right there for current year. So any questions that we had on current year, where we are and where we're projected to be at the end of the fiscal year at the end of August? Okay.
Yeah, let me just throw this out, because I think, so just to be clear, so it's looking like, best estimate at this point, we're going to have $6.6 million excess retained, I guess you can call it, for this fiscal year.
That is our projection at this time, knowing that we've got some other caveats in there.
So I just wanted you to talk out, because I think I'd heard some rumors were running around town that since, we haven't had in-class education or whatnot, that we should be saving a lot of money, and therefore the school district should refund whatever excess we happen to have back to the taxpayers. So obviously looking ahead, we're projecting a deficit budget moving forward.
Yes, sir.
So what are your thoughts on, A, could you refund that money even if you wanted to, and then B, how does that money figure into a budget moving forward? Because obviously some years we have excess, some years we're in deficit, but just what are your thoughts moving forward?
Well, thoughts moving forward, and the board's very aware of this as we've talked about budget projections, budget monitoring under current year, and budget projections for future years. We're going to work extremely hard to change some of our processes to make sure we are doing a better job of accurately forecasting the amount of money that we have available each year. One of the things that we've highlighted that the board has known and has seen in the past that I saw when coming here is that we overproject some places and underproject some places, and then we've had money available at the end of the year, every year, even doing EPP, or almost every year, and taking care of some of our other needs. So if we can be better on the front end in accurately projecting our revenue and our expenditures, then we have that money available to be able to use appropriately during the year to meet our needs, and not having money at the end left over to put into fund balance. That is one of the reasons why last month or a month before we introduced the idea of a deficit budget, which a deficit budget does a couple things. One, it allows us in this district that has a very healthy fund balance to be able to use the resources that have been set aside for us to meet needs, especially in this interesting time that we find ourselves in with COVID. And the second thing is we know that we have historically underspent personnel, and so there's been money that's left over at the end. So even if we present a deficit budget, there is a high likelihood that it would be less of a deficit at the end of the year, or even a break-even budget, depending on how large that deficit budget is that's adopted. So I would answer that, Mr. Inman, and say we've got to do a better job of monitoring our budget during the year and making more accurate projections for the current year. And that's something we're working on. We've not been allowed to do. I mean, we're in the middle of it right now, And so we can't go back and change the processes that we did last year and moving into this year. We can only change those moving forward. And I would point out that this is a huge anomaly that we would have this amount of money available for moving into the type of remote operations that we did. Even though we are starting, many of our kids are going to choose to go remote. And even though we've got at least 2 of our schools that have to operate totally remote for the first 3.5 weeks of school, we do anticipate coming back to school and being in our buildings at some time fairly soon. So I don't know that, I don't anticipate that we're going to see the type of budgetary savings next year or for fiscal 21 that we saw in fiscal 20 when we basically shut down for 5 months.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we ended the year remote, the state opted not to pay us for that amount. It came from the CARES Act, is that correct? The monies? It was a federal kind of thing instead of a state funding?
So basically, they filled the hole, they underfunded us the amount of whatever our CARES Act entitlement was. And they adjusted the mechanism, so we saw $39,000 of gain from that.
Okay.
And the rest just filled that hole, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, and so part I wanted to get at too, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think the state's estimating they may be $5 billion in the hole or something along those lines because of just a lack of sales tax revenue and
So
oil
they,
gas.
I would say they very conservatively estimated that under current year, they would be about 4.6, 4.8, something like that, $1 billion less. That was talking current year, and they haven't, comptroller has not released any preliminary estimates for the next biennium.
So I guess, so the big point is, I think this individual got a lot of blowback, I guess, on that recommendation, but just, there's a lot of uncertainty in the system right now. There's literally no idea what the state's going to do here a year from now. And while we may have somewhat of a surplus over the course of this year, even without a pay raise for our employees, we're still looking at an incredibly tight budget moving forward and a lot of uncertainty.
We have a very uncertain budget moving forward because as we have talked about a lot during this budget planning cycle, the biggest driver to the revenue side of our budget is how many kids we are going to have. It used to be how many kids you had and how often they came to school. Now it's how many kids you have and how often are they coming to school or engaging daily in remote instruction. And so as we process through parent surveys, as we go through our registration data, as we build master schedules, as we communicate our health and safety protocols to our community, obviously our main focus is on providing a safe and appropriate education for our kiddos and for our staff. But Mr. Pruski in the business office are working to figure out how many kids are we going to have, so what is the revenue actually going to be as we move forward through the 2020-2021 budget.
Thanks.
Sure. All right, any other questions under current year? Okay. We're going to now look into next year, the budget projection. This is what we will ultimately have to approve for our budget for next year, and just a reminder, we do that in late August. So we've updated our budget assumptions, so I kind of want to share those with you. On the revenue side first, our property tax revenue, we have that, it's moved from a 97 to a 98% collection rate. We have, you remember we were looking at a 0 growth in property values. We have adjusted that to a 5% increase in property values. And what that is going to do for us, and I'll show you that here in a second, it's actually going to compress our maintenance and operations tax rate a little bit more. We'll explain how that works here in just a second. Our ADA loss that we had projected, that's how we projected 1% fewer students next year than we had this year. That was our best guesstimate that we could do early on. We have changed that to, instead of 1%, we've changed that to 0.5% of ADA loss. And one of the reasons is we're getting better information about hold harmless provisions for school funding next year. We know that we'll be held harmless for sure for the first 12 weeks. So that means if we had half the kids enrolled in the district, you know, if we had less than what we did last year for the first 12 weeks, we get to use last year's numbers. So that helps, obviously, with just the general feeling in our community and other communities as people live with the virus and hopefully transition more into on-campus instruction as we work through, you know, our return to campus, both in SCUC and across the state. So hopefully it can kind of help get us through and we have more people, make sure that we've got more people, you know, fully involved either remotely or in person as we move into the winter time here of next school year. So that's why we've halved that from a 1% loss to a 0.5% loss. Another thing that we're talking about in regards to budget planning and monitoring is one of the things that we do that districts have the option of doing every 2 years, that's prior to a legislative session, is you go in to the TEAL website and you make budgetary projections, you make pupil projections for ADA, how many kids we think we're going to have based on local factors, and how many kids we think we're going to have by program, by special education in our different instructional settings, by bilingual, by gifted and talented, and those types of things. We have, as a practice, not gone and updated those. The opportunity comes every 2 years, and you do it for the next year and the year after, so both years of the biennium. So that has been the mechanism by which we have overestimated our ADA, and so the state has overpaid us a little bit each year. When they do overpay us, then the next year they withhold a certain amount of that. Does that make sense? So what we got overpaid in 1920, then they can hold back from the state money that we'd be getting under the foundation school program. Our estimation right now, we're really looking at this number right now. The most conservative number I can give you is 2.2 million. We might get less, and you'll see this here in a second, as we pointed out. This may not end up being the case. It may be, we may not get that much deducted, and we're still working through how that looks and how they may have addressed this in our payment system during this current year. So this number could be better, but that's, again, to be as conservative as we can, that is what we have in there, a reduction, 2.2 million from a previous year overestimation of ADA. So moving into, let's look at the revenue detail. This is a little different than what we had last time. So the first column is the June forecast. It's where we are for current year. Okay, so this was the last column that we saw earlier. We remember we were at for total revenues of $133.8 million under current year. That's our best estimate where we're going to end. That middle column is where we were last month in projecting our revenue for next year, and the last column is where we are this month in projecting our revenue. So really we're going to look at the last two columns as to what has changed. So the first thing is you see that we have we've lowered our ADA loss, so we've increased our total ADA from 14,920 to 14,993. So that's going to mean a little bit more money for us down a little bit further. Here is the estimated effect of the property tax. So if we get total certified values of 5%, 5% is greater than the state rate that is in statute. So the state projected increased property value growth statewide is 4.01%. So that number in that middle column that has the box around it, 96.64 cents, that's the number based on the state rate. So if we had a property value increase here in our total tax base of 4.01% or less, that would be our M&O tax rate. That's our compressed tax rate plus the 4 pennies of enrichment plus the 1 penny of enrichment subject to board vote. That's what that whole number is, 96.64 cents. Since our estimate right now of property value increase is above 4.01, that extra almost 1% lowers our M&O tax rate what is that, about 0.8 of a penny? So that is the House Bill 3 at work right there. As property values rise in districts, in growing districts like ours, and ones with accelerating property values, the property tax rate gets lowered for those taxpayers in that district. Okay. So, and then you can see the impact on well, you can see the property tax rate number goes up to 58.7 million. We moved some money in there from things that have been paid in arrears also. So what we're looking at now under the State Foundation School Program, moving from just under $60 million in FSP last month to about 56 million. So some of that is that 2.2 million. Some of it is just as we get new templates, money moves around a little bit. So I didn't put a box around it, but just above that box of 56 million in the far column, you'll see $300,000. It says property value audit. We contract with a third party to do property value audits. When they find that the state owes us money because we overpaid the state based on property values, then we go through that and we usually get a little bit of money back. Under current year, you can see that we're projected to get about $490,000 current year of additional revenue back under their property value studies. Okay? So as you can see at the bottom, moving from June forecast to July, we're at about 131.1. We were at 132.2 as far as revenue projection for next year. Okay. Again, what's the main reason? The main reason is we're projecting fewer students. So, okay, so moving on, let's talk about our appropriations assumptions. And you'll see some big changes in this as well. The biggest is going to be in our 6,100. So these are increased personnel costs. We have $1.2 million in long-term special education substitutes. We had some of those in the budget to meet our needs. And then we, as Mrs. Ferguson and her team, and Mrs. Cannon and the HR office went through projections for next year based on students and their ARD committee decisions and their instructional settings and needs. We saw that we needed some additional long-term subs. I will be honest with you. We want these to be full-time teachers. And eventually, we're going to change these over from long-term subs to full-time teachers. With the uncertainty in the budget this year, this was not the year we felt to be able to do that. But it is my hope, and I think ours as a system and the administration's hope, that we will start whittling away at this number of long-term subs and turn these into full-time teachers for us as we move forward. So that's 1.2 million in that. We've added 150,000 of additional days school year. That's not, it sounds grammatically incorrect, but that's what the program's called. That's the additional 30 days that we have the option to do at the end of the school year because we moved our calendar to 180 days of instruction. We have to expend the money and then we get reimbursed 1/2 of the ADA subsequently. So that's the outlay for teachers should we do this. If we don't, if things happen and our school year calendar gets kind of messed up because of the progression of disease and we don't end up doing that, we obviously don't spend that, but here it is in the budget. $110,000 in substitutes for Reading Academy. We do have, Dr. Edwards, Ms. Kovacs, around 100, 110 teachers?
Right at 100, and then we also have the campus elementary principals that are involved in that this year.
Going through that Reading Academy, assuming that all still stays stood up as it's supposed to, and every indication that we receive from the agency is it will. So that's where you see that in the budget. Since last month, we have added 400,000 in what we're calling dedicated campus subs. And what we're saying is we know because of people being sick, having to care for children, that we're going to have some teacher needs every day at every campus. So these represent 20 district-wide positions that we're just saying, okay, you work 180 days as a sub. We'll tell you hopefully the week before, but maybe the morning before where you're going. So, but you are assured of working for us every day. And so we've set aside $400,000 to try to, again, to get ahead. It's not the only thing we're doing to try to increase our sub pool, but we realize with the two instructional programs that we're running and not knowing who's going to need to be out for a few days from being sick, waiting for testing results to come back, that we need to be more proactive in addressing our sub needs. And so that's where you're seeing it here in the budget. And the last thing you see is $620,000 in step raises for our employees that are on step schedules. So those are teachers, nurses, and librarians. And, you know, they were, those folks, we talked about that a lot with the passage of House Bill 3 and what we had to do under House Bill 3 legislation. A step is simply, I've been teaching 6 years, and next year I'm teaching 7. On our salary schedule, you see this, the year 6 teacher is here, and the year 7 teacher is there. So we are moving them up the step schedule. This is a change from where we were. In an abundance of caution, in being very conservative, we started with no increase in compensation for any classes of employees through the first few months of this. I was on a conference call with Bexar County superintendents today and checking with them. We were kind of checking in with each other as to what folks are doing around the greater San Antonio area in regards to compensation. There are still a number of districts that are going into next year and recommending no raises for any employees, just keeping it flat. There are some who are doing what we are considering here, which is offering steps for teachers. Teachers for us would be teachers, nurses, and librarians only. And some are doing a consideration of a retention payment after the school year starts, subject to board resolution, should the money be available. So nobody is going with 1 or 2 or 3% raises. Nobody's talking about other classes of employees. That's where kind of we are with districts around the area. As we have talked about this administratively, we're going to be asking everybody to do more. We're asking administrators, we're asking custodians, we're asking bus drivers, we're asking instructional assistants and clerical assistants, and we're certainly asking teachers to do more. But this would be, we know that teachers, many of whom are going to have to be teaching students online and in person at the same time. So we wanted to start the conversation with the board before we come back with a compensation plan next Tuesday about including step raises for teachers, nurses, and librarians. And so we put that into the numbers that you're going to see here in a minute. And then the last thing here, as far as appropriations budget assumptions, is the COVID-19 unknowns that you saw in there for $500,000 have been incorporated into supplies and materials. So, so that's the first thing. Yeah, I guess I'll show you here in a second. So, in going in order of what we talked about, with all of those ads that we talked about just a second ago, that moves from the last month, our 6,100 cost about $2 million from 104.7 to 106.7. We have subs in there for special ed. We have subs in there for a greater contingency for campus absences. We have subs in there for Reading Academy. And then, of course, we have in there step increases to the tune of about $620,000. So that's the biggest change. You see that the TRS on behalf grew. If you have more in salaries, then you have more in on behalf, and the number above that we get in revenue is the same, 6.5 million. The COVID-19 instruction operational unknowns, that really got moved in to materials and supplies. But you will notice that under contracted services, we lowered our projected amount in contracted services since last month from 13.4 million to 12.6. Even with adding that unknown into the budget of 500,000 for materials and supplies, still lowered that from 6.2 million to about 5.1 million. And then you can see capital outlay is roughly the same, within $37,000 of each other. So the big number is we've basically stayed about the same, within about $100,000 or so of where we were last month on the appropriation side. What you know from a few slides back is the revenue slide right now has gone a little lower than it was last month. So when we put it all together, this is the back side of the sheet of paper that we passed out that just has it all together. You can see that last month we projected a deficit budget of about $2.1 million for next year, and we're looking at, for next year, a deficit budget of about $3.3 million. That's where we sit right now, based on those assumptions that we just talked about. Now, I will go one slide further. If you look at where we were at the beginning of this school year, the one that we're in August of 2019, we started with a fund balance of $43.4 million. If we add in $6.6 million into the fund balance this year, and we take out $3.3 million next year, the end of next year, 24 months later, we're still $3.2 million ahead of where we were. Because we put a lot in this year, we took we took less than that out next year under what we're looking at right now. And that is the last spreadsheet with lots of little numbers that I'll show you tonight. So we've got some other things to talk about with debt service and all that, but I'd love to have a conversation about what you've seen and ask questions of Mr. Pruski and myself.
Questions? Gary?
Do we have any
Jerry?
teachers that are affected by when their kids can't go to school, they have to teach their kids instead of their students?
So we will undoubtedly have teachers and other employees who will be impacted by either a personal or family health situation or other family situation that could potentially impact their ability to be involved in face-to-face instruction. So for all of those individuals, we are working one-on-one with our Human Resources Office on their particular needs. We believe that almost all of them will be able to participate in either, we're talking about teachers now, in either remote instruction or in-person instruction, and will be able to do so from SCUCISD buildings. We can make arrangements for folks who need, so they can be here, they can have the benefit of our technology, the benefit of being with others to plan. And if they cannot be in close proximity to more people, we can socially distance them through our building. So we feel like we'll be able to do most of that, but again, we will be working each one of those individually through the Human Resources Office.
I just want to say I appreciate the clearness and conciseness of what we're hearing tonight. I think y'all have really gotten down into the weeds, the nitty gritty, or whatever you want to call it, of this finance of our budget. Finance can get away from you if you're not on top of it and don't clearly and truly understand it. And I believe that we have folks here that really do understand it and can explain it to where folks can understand it and appreciate it. And also, in going back to what, Dr. Lee, what you were saying about asking more of our teachers and our staff, when you and I had our conversation the other day, we talked about, I mentioned that, we're going to be asking a lot of our classroom teachers and our non-custodial, non-maintenance staff people to help with the cleaning of the areas and things like that to maintain as much of a safe environment as we possibly can. So anything we can do to help them with a step increase or whatever it is, I'm certainly in favor of that. Plus, it also helps their TRS at the end of the run there. So a one-time payment wouldn't do that, but where a step would. So I think that's also a benefit too. So anyway, I appreciate what you guys have done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And ladies as well too. Guys, it's all guys, so, you know. And you too, Priscilla.
I'm kind of curious, moving forward, with us going to somewhat remote, part of the year or half the year, I don't know. How do we think this is going to impact our hourly employees?
In what respect?
You know, as far as, like, if we were to do remote for the first two, and I know we haven't had that discussion, but I'm just thinking, you know, at times when we're remote, are we still, like, if we're not busing kids the first 3 weeks of school? Those are hourly employees, I believe. Our food service folks are hourly employees. We
Okay,
have
that helps me. So
Okay.
now I know what we're talking about. So if we are in a situation if we should find ourselves in a situation where we are remote only for a period of time, then we will still need to feed kiddos because we're teaching them remotely, and we will have needs for our food service, for our child nutrition personnel. And we will have needs to help deliver those somewhat, not to their door, but in some form or fashion we would need that. That is a conversation we actually had this afternoon. We love all of our employees. We love our bus drivers, and we want to make sure that they're employed. And when we are back and we are on routes, we want to make sure that they're still with us. And so I think what we would do is we would figure out a way to utilize them on campus or another way if we should have them with us, but not operating their buses on routes for a large majority of their time. So that is something we are certainly considering, how we would use them. Not whether, but how.
Dr. Haley, could you just elaborate more on the, I guess, step pay raises or step increases, if you could?
Sure. So on our website, you see through 20 or 25 years? Our salary schedules through 20 or 25? Through 25 years. You see how much a year 0 teacher, a year 1, a year 2, a year 4, a year 5, so on and so forth. So if I'm a 7-year teacher this year, next year I am an 8-year teacher. We could, because they are not guaranteed that step, we could just freeze it and not pay any more and just readjust our salary schedule to reflect that teachers did not get a pay increase and redo the salary schedule. Or we could keep the salary schedule the same and pay them their step. So they get an additional $450 or $500 or $300 or whatever that step is moving down the salary schedule. So it's a little different for each step.
Yeah, because I just thought for years we were on a step schedule where every year teachers automatically got a pay raise from year to year to year based upon, experience. And I thought we had gone off of that, and we basically gave a percentage increase on a yearly basis.
Yeah, I thought we were in bands, is what I was just thinking, like 0 to 5 we're in a band, the midpoint and all that.
We did go off of that step scale, actually before I was even in HR, but we still create a scale for each year, and
You have to have one.
we publish it online just because our teachers want to see what that next year might look like. But every year we readjust that scale to reflect whatever the percentage raise it is.
Okay, that's what I mean. So last year, for example, did our employees get an increase because of the step or because we gave a percentage increase?
We gave a percentage increase.
And I think that's been the case for
And that happens every year, basically.
Yes.
a number of years. So we haven't given a step increase in quite some time,
No.
right?
No, we actually readjust that scale every single year to reflect whatever percentage increase there is.
Okay.
That's why we're not used to talking about step increases. Yeah.
Right. So just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. So
It is in essence a step increase. It's just because that step has changed because of the added percentage of salary increase that we give. I mean, so if you left it the way it was, you would have a step increase every year. If you don't give a raise, and in years we didn't get a raise, they would still have that step increase. Now, again, like Ms. Cannon is saying, we went away from that, but yet you still have to show what it would be without any percentage increase in raise. Just like she said, staff people want to know what their salary is probably going to be. And again, we've been fortunate to be able to do some sort of percentage increase, and that goes to that step. I mean, so it is in essence always a step increase. So semantics.
It is. It's a very confusing concept because you put something on the website and a teacher or employee who's on a step scale assumes that next year I'm going to make that next year, and that's not the case. Because the board considers every year how much of an increase to be able to grant. 2%, 0.5%, whatever it is. House Bill 3 was a game changer last year because we had to do things differently for our 0 to 5 year employees than we did for 6 and above. So that had to be a differential. And so we then made the salary schedule after that decision was made to fit the board's decision. So what we're doing now is we're contemplating putting $620,000 in for teachers to look at that scale and say, okay, I'm going to make that next year. Okay, and then it doesn't lock us in to doing it that way every year from here in the future.
Yeah. So several questions on that. So we're looking to, I guess I'll use the word, implement that step schedule for this year, so everybody moves up on the chart, I'll call it. Doesn't guarantee that they're moving up on the chart next year.
Correct.
We just move everybody to the right or move them up 1 year or however you want to do it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct. And we actually put a note at the bottom of that salary schedule is for that current year only and no years going forward.
All right, and so I think you said $620,000 is how much we're allocating? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And how many employees total are we talking about? So you're talking teachers, nurses, counselors?
Librarians. Teachers, nurses, and librarians.
Librarians. So counselors are not
No.
included?
They're on
Counselors are on an admin scale.
Okay, so roughly how many employees?
1,000? How many employees?
Probably a little over 1,000
Half
employees.
of our total staff, I think, right? Something like that?
Correct.
Okay. So is it pretty much even for each, I mean, is there a staggered amount where a third-year teacher would make more from 3 to 4 versus a 20 to a 21?
It depends on the year, but it's around, like you said, $300 to $500,
Per
$600 for each step that you move up.
Okay, so just ballparking, you're talking about $600 per employee, though? We're talking
Maybe a
about
little
1,000?
more, maybe a little less, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll just throw this out there. We've made concerted effort over the years to try to have one of the highest paid staffs in the area. I mean, we went from, I know back in the day, we were one of the lowest paying districts in all of Bexar County, and we got to where we were the top paying district. And I think we've fallen off a little bit of that lately, but, so we definitely made a concerted effort to do that, especially the teachers that are on the more experienced side of the scale as well.
Yes.
So the last time we visited, we were looking at $132 million in revenues with no pay increase. And now you're coming back saying we're looking at actually $1 million less in revenues than what we were a month ago, but we're looking to do a pay raise now. And I'll call it a pay raise. I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at, right? So, I think we always talk about trying to pay our employees the most that we can. I just have some concern, quite honestly, and to be frank about it, in an environment where a lot of people are losing their jobs, a lot of commission-based people are getting paid a heck of a lot less, tax increases are going up. A lot of folks will say, heck, government employees are lucky to have a job because the people in the private sector don't. And our revenues are decreasing. And we're still possibly discussing a pay increase, even though it may not be that much. And we're also looking at a possible tax increase as well. And that's something that there are some folks in the public that are going to have some questions about that. So I just kind of wanted to make sure we're on the same page here about I know our teachers are working hard. The changes you guys had to go through this spring is, obviously it's been a tough spring. It's going to be a tough fall. I just want to make sure we can have that conversation with the public about we're giving pay raises when a lot of people are losing their jobs or having serious pay cuts.
Appreciate that.
What I took from the charts we just saw is that no matter what happens, our O&M tax rate is going down. Not the tax revenue, but the tax rate. O&S, or M&O, sorry. Different bureaucracy. So I think we can look the taxpayers in the eye and say that the tax rate has gone down and will go down because of the growth, because of House Bill 3.
If I would jump in here real quick. We're talking about, just a reminder to everybody who might be watching, there are two tax rates that the board levies. One is a maintenance and operation tax rate, and one is an interest in sinking INS or debt service tax rate. So I think most people, when they pay their taxes, they look at the overall tax rate number. And what we're talking about, M&O right now, is moving down from 97 cents under current year to a projected 95.58. So about 1.2 pennies right there. We still have a conversation to be had about debt service, and so we don't know where that's going to ultimately be.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jerry. I think also, but the average person is going to see their home value go up, so they're going to see a tax increase. And I know we don't get those dollars. I mean, that's always a misnomer too, that it's not like we get the dollar for dollar. The state offsets everything, but it's the average guy in the street thinks we're getting that money when they have a tax increase on the home or whatnot. So, all right. I mean, was that decision based upon a need for higher retention? Our employees deserve it, or we do have the $6.6 million left over, so it's going to be okay? And I know, I forget how much did we give as a pay increase last year? Do you remember, Linda? Wasn't a whole lot.
It was different between House Bill 3. You had to do 0 to 5 more by actual dollars than you did your others. So.
And the question we normally run through anytime we're dealing with employees is, we normally have a fairly good chart about what other districts in the surrounding areas are doing so that we stay competitive. In other words, if no one else is giving a pay raise, but we do, we need to be able to justify that financially. Or if everyone else is giving a bigger pay raise than us, we need to take a look at how we can catch up with everybody else. So do we have a sense of what everyone else is doing?
So that's, I tried to kind of summarize that. We do know that Seguin is moving forward with a step increase. And many of the districts around ours, I didn't write down exactly where everybody was today, but the consensus is they're looking at step increases for their teachers, nurses, and librarians, or they're holding on with nothing at this point and moving forward with perhaps a retention bonus next year should the money be available. And it's probably 50-50. Where we were 2 months ago, 3 months ago, is nobody was doing anything because of the sheer unknowns. But I think most people are looking at some of the hold harmless that we're looking at as well. And I think we are putting ourselves right in where just about everybody else is, so that we can hopefully keep our advantage on pay rates where we have them and not fall any further behind anywhere else.
Okay, because I know we'd still like to stay at least in the top 10, top 20% as far as pay, or I think that's what we'd agreed upon. But is there any way, so when we actually do this again, can you guys take the time to put together a chart about just what the other districts are doing, and assuming we do this, where we would stand in comparison with everybody else? I mean, we've done that in the past.
We certainly can do that, and we'll know to the best of our ability. So for any districts there around here that are July 1 fiscal years, we'll obviously be able to have their information. Everybody else is doing just like us, having that discussion right now. So this was based on a phone call I had today, so it's the freshest information I can give you it right now.
Because I know, because I understand both sides of this, but if we don't do it, then we lose ground to our competing districts, and then that kind of starts heading you down a bad path. So just, I'd love to be able to see that before we take a final vote. So it's just me. Yeah. Thanks.
Other questions? Discussion?
I did have one question. Okay, the 3.384 million that's a deficit, that would, sorry about that. I turned it down. That was $6 million of our fund balance coming forward. If we don't have that fund balance, that number goes down as far as our excess fund balance at the end of the year. Because you were talking about 1.2 million potentially. If the state gives us that, then we got to come with 1.2 million for connectivity. So that would come down from there. So that figure wouldn't be a correct amount, right?
Yeah, I think when we first,
Because you said several times that that 6.6 will probably not hold.
it will probably not hold. There is still some opportunity for some potential little bit of increase in revenue by the time we get to the end of the year. We're still looking at that. And we know that we still can underspend our personnel, so that can help us out on the appropriations side as well. So we may be able to, if we do spend the 1.2, it may not be 6.6 down minus 1.2 to 5.4. It may not be that. It may be somewhere in between. Just kind of letting everybody know it probably won't be exactly 6.6. It'll be a little less.
Okay, so these numbers are going to float. One of the things, too, I know that this year is the second half of the biennium. The 2.5 percentage rate increase of revenue kicks in next year. What's that going to look like going forward? Because the calculations I keep running, we're going to be losing money in years out. If the state doesn't have the money or they cut that funding, then we're still stuck at 2.5%, and that fund balance is going to look really nice to have going forward. So if we run a deficit this year, then that deficit is going to kind of start to carry over, and we're going to be in the same boat with M&O we are with INS right now. And yet we'll have no way of making any changes to the M&O side except for cutting like crazy. And I'm worried about the out years at this point in time. I realize we're approving a budget for 2021, but those out years are going to get here quicker than we think. And I'm just wondering what those out years are going to look like.
So there's revenues and there's appropriation. I think if you look at the appropriations, the budget that we adopted in August of 2019 was $134.2 million. And the budget that we're looking here is $134.5 million. It's only $300,000 more in appropriations. The hit that we're taking is our projected loss in kids. So that is really what is incumbent upon us, is making sure that we have the quality programs, both in person and online, to be able to keep kids coming to SCUCISD. That we also, from the state perspective, that as families are making very difficult decisions on how they're going to educate their kids, that we have very purposeful safety nets and hold harmless provisions from the Texas Education Agency. Not only us, but a lot of people across the state are worried about losing kids who are just not coming back or going somewhere else. That's the real impact, Mr. Finley, I would say, is projecting how many kids we have. If we do well and we continue to have kids stick with us and come here, we have people come and move into the district, as we know we are adding houses. You know, to the extent that we exceed those revenue projections, those ADA projections, we'll be doing much better off. It really isn't increased spending. We've lowered spending a number of places to increase spending others. It's a reapportionment of how that spending is going. It's really on the revenue side.
The point I'm trying to make there is that the budgeting is going to continue to be an interesting process, and it's going to get potentially tighter as time goes on. So the steps we take today are going to carry on forward, and so if the more forward thinking we are, the better we budget today will carry us forward, and we'll be able to do better budgeting in the future. The public needs to understand that we're doing the best we can with the money that's being given us for education, but the requirements and demands of that on the education system continue to go up, and we're doing the best we can with what we have. So I just want the public to understand that, yeah, it looks like a lot of money, it looks like we're getting a little bit more, but we're doing a lot more with that money too. So,
we're having to, and the dynamic tension that boards feel as they go through this every year, and none more than this year, is how do we take care of the needs that we have sitting in front of us in our chairs and in our homes right now, but still keep us able to meet our needs in the future.
Right.
And that is something that I know we have struggled with for years, and we've been very conservative about that and making sure that we have money available, that we have built a healthy fund balance to be able to help out when times get tough. you are right. We can't build a system that continually takes away from our fund balance, from our reserves there. But it can tide us over in a year or two where our understanding of how many kids are going to be with us is fuzzy. And that's kind of what we're looking at right here.
That's what I was trying to get the point across, is that it looks like that we're getting more money, but we're really not, and we're going to do as much as we can with the money we get. And if anybody wants to talk about where the money comes from, like Gary was saying, every time our tax rate goes, our taxable value goes up here, the state takes an equal amount, if not more, back from us. So every year we seem like we're doing more with less, and at some point in time, it's going to reach a fallover point, and especially when you have reducing attendance, that's going to happen sooner rather than later, and we're just trying to keep ahead of that. So I appreciate that. So I just want the public to understand that we're doing the best we can with what we got, and these are some very trying times, not just for them, but for us as a whole, trying to provide education for their students.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, I think this community, by and large, overwhelmingly supports what this school district has done over the years. You know, you hear and you see positive things all the time, no matter what, if it's our academics or extracurricular or whatever. We have a very supportive community, and I think this community appreciates the fact that we don't typically take money out of a fund balance to pay for recurring costs, because that is a recipe for disaster, and that will dwindle your fund balance quicker than anything. We're pretty prudent about, you know, we have a one-time cost, okay. It's a one-time cost, and that's what we do, whether it's a, you know, capital outlay item or whatever. So I think it's, you know, as much information as we can get out and be as transparent as possible. I think that's always wise and prudent. But I also think that, you know, I think we're going to get support for what we're trying to do. You know, whatever little step increase there is for what we're asking our teachers to do on a daily basis, I don't think it's too much. In fact, it's never enough. So I'll be happy to answer questions from anybody if they have any concerns about that. So I think moving forward, we need to consider those things. Anyway. And, you know, we've been here before. This is not new territory for us with budgets. So I've said a million times that I don't know that we've ever had a budget we just waltzed through without having some trepidation about it, feeling that we were being squeezed. It's a system, and the state has it rigged against us. So, you know, that's the way it works.
Love to answer any more questions.
Any other comments, discussion? Just for me, clarification, if that step doesn't occur, so those teachers are going to make they'll stay where they're at and will not get the step that they typically would get with the percentage increase that we've done in the past, or even with House Bill 3, what they did. And so I'm like Mr. Pivito, it does scare me dipping in when we have to have reoccurring funds. We've seen many districts, some around us, that have had to do that and use that. But I also know that we have a very healthy fund balance on the other flip side of that, and we want to use it prudently. And what we're going to be asking not only them to do this year, but everyone. And being a former teacher, I can only imagine what some of them are thinking right now. And so for $600, which doesn't seem like very much at this moment or less, I would prefer to keep that in the budget forecast.
Madam President, just to, you asked if they would be making the exact same thing. There's lots of things that figure in there.
Right.
The TRS contribution from an employee does not increase this year, correct? It's next year, right? Okay, I just want to double check that before I said something wrong. And we have kept the premiums the same for our health insurance plans as well.
Which is wonderful.
We were very intentional about that for the last couple months. and putting together a health insurance package that would allow us to do that, not knowing that we were going to be able to even come and entertain this conversation that we are tonight. So,
And actually, I remember from the healthcare, they even have another option
there'll
that
be
some may.
another one that has
Yes.
lower premiums. That's
So
correct.
I appreciate all of you in
Yeah,
HR
it's,
doing
you know,
that.
it's good to have a lower premium, but with a higher out-of-pocket cost for those folks who are young, 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And that's, we've all been there.
And fewer providers.
I don't think anybody in this room is there now, but, we've all been there at some point in time.
Okay. Any other, go ahead, Robert.
Dr. Ely, that healthy fund balance,
Yes, sir.
projecting to the next next legislative cycle, you think that would be a target? I mean, obviously, the state projected that we're already going to take close to a $5 billion hit. So if districts around the state of Texas essentially have healthy fund balances, politicians will say, what will they say?
So you speak like somebody who was around in 2011, because that was the rumor that was going to happen then. And boards went through a process to restrict and set aside fund balance for projects and things like that. I think EPP and just kind of set it aside for that. So their unrestricted fund balance number would look less, thinking the state would come after that. I'm hearing nothing to that effect. The comptroller did put out a number for current year, nothing for the next biennium. We have no idea where oil prices are going to be and what it's going to look like. My wondering is, will the state come back and keep the structure of House Bill 3 in place, but not fully fund the ADA, not the basic allotment, the allotments in it, and cut that back a little bit as a mechanism to be able to make the numbers balance. And so that would be, any way you slice it, that's less money coming into us in state revenue. And so that's something that we would have to look at what we're going to do, moving forward as to what that looks like. So that is, we've got a lot of road to travel. We've got an election and we've got a legislative session, and we've got to figure out where we are as an economy in the state. But that's what I think will happen. I do believe, as I believe everybody in this room does, that the next biennium will be worse than what we're looking at right now. To what extent and where it comes from, that's what we'll be talking about for 140 days in Austin, starting in January.
All right, so it's a big picture. What's the timeline moving forward with the budget?
Okay, so let me just talk about debt service update. We don't have much of a debt service update. We are working with Samco, as you are aware. Mr. Westerman is waiting to go to the market. We anticipate that that we will be going to the market early in August, probably that first week. We did get an update today saying the market conditions are still looking favorable and maybe even a little bit better than when we first decided to do this. So it's looking good for us in the time window that we have. Once we are able to go into the market and know where we are, be able to come back and determine what our options are on our debt service tax rate. Do we want to keep it flat? Do we want to increase it slightly? Do we want to increase it the amount that the M&O we think will go down to keep it flat? We can have all those discussions there, and we'll have that information coming forward. So we anticipate that it's going to happen on the 4th, plus or minus, of next month, and then we'll have that information as we go through the month of August. So, Mr. Prisky, anything you want to add about debt service before we go into timeline? Okay. I keep hitting the wrong button, so wrong computer. So the 28th, next Tuesday, we will have our certified property values from Bexar County and Guadalupe County. So we'll know what that number is, and we'll be able to report that next Tuesday. And then, as we visited earlier, we will ask you to consider a compensation package at that time. Then on August 11th, we are having a called workshop. That will be important because we will receive our M&O tax rate. Again, what type of compression if our values are above the 4.01% state rate? What's that going to mean for our M&O tax rate? So we'll have that. And then we'll obviously have updated numbers based on, new templates and decisions that are made and what we know at that time. August 18th would be our regular meeting. And then we will be asking y'all to set August 27th as our public hearing. That will be an action item at our meeting next Tuesday, correct, Mr. Pruski?
Yes.
Okay. And at that August 27th public hearing is when we have the public hearing, we approve the budget and set the tax rates. So that's what we have in front of us. And with that, that is the end of our presentation. So I'd love to answer any other questions you have about where we are, M&O, INS, process.
Any questions? We're good. I like to say, just like Mr. Pivoto said, I liked all the clear, concise information and just how it was broken down and the comparison. Great job for all of you that worked on it, Dr. Ely, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Pruski, and
Pruski.
your team for doing all this.
Yeah, I know he has a team back there working as well on it, so great explanation on all that. All right, if there is not anything else, we will adjourn at 7:31 and see everyone on Thursday at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great one.